Well, welcome to today's show, everyone. I'm Mike Lester. I'm here today with a friend of mine we've known for, I don't know, probably, John, 10 years or so.
Probably.
Yeah. And I'm excited about our topic today. Today, in our worldview issue, we're going to talk about fostering and how that's an outgrowth of a biblical worldview. So I'm honored today to have a friend of mine, Jon Stone. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I'm thankful to be on your podcast, and I appreciate your friendship. I've always I enjoyed our times together when we wrote a curriculum for the book of Colossians. Do you remember that?
It's one of my favorite memories, John.
Yeah.
You, me, and another guy, Toby England.
Yep.
I enjoyed our meetings every week, working through the text and writing those Sunday school curriculum for adult teachers.
It was a lot of fun. So, Mike, I'm thankful to be here. My wife and I've been a pastor for 31 and a half years. Over the years, my wife and I have fostered 41 children.
Wow.
We've been a temporary parent to 41 kids. And, it opened our eyes to how the gospel enters into the hardest places and some of the darkest places. And so I do think biblical worldview certainly would include a nod and a look toward fostering for sure.
John, I knew that this had become a passion for you, but I had no idea that there were that many children that have come to your home. That's incredible.
Yeah, Mike, if I can be real honest, it was never on my radar. And my wife and I wrote a book. It came out in September of 21. And in that book, I tell the story of our youngest was in ninth grade, and you'll remember him. And so he was in school, and I said to Dawn, I said, "Hey, babe, you have been a rock star. You have kept the family together. You've taken it for the team. You have followed me in ministry. What do you want to do?" And I was thinking, hey, she's want to go back and get her master's in music, or she's got an education. Yeah, something. And then she said, I really want to foster. I was like,
Wow.
oh, are you kidding me? Um, and I made a note to self, don't ever ask Dawn questions you don't know the answers to. So I kind of left it alone, and she had been saying this for all of our marriage. Hey, if you ever want to foster, I want you to know, or adopt, I'm willing. And so I remember one time I walked in the kitchen, and she's just sobbing, and it's like, what are you doing? And she said, I'm just looking at all the children in Africa, the orphans. And according to UNICEF, just as a little highlight here, there are 153 million orphans in this world, and most of them are not in America. They are in in Africa, in Asia, where it's really, they have hard times. But I remember saying, oh wow. So then God really did three things to help me to become the open to this. And number one, I had a master sergeant share a testimony in church, and so she stood up, and I had no idea. I just know she had a great testimony, and she had a great testimony in the Air Force. And she stood up, and she starts talking, and she said, yeah, not many of you know this, but I spent time in foster care, and that's when I heard about Jesus. I'm going, what? Are you kidding me? And so I didn't even look at my wife. She's sitting in the worship center. I don't even look at her. I just look straight ahead. And within the next week or two, I'm at Starbucks, which is where all of pastors, network. That's our office. So I'm sitting at Starbucks, and I always sit at the long table where somebody else can be there. And so I'm looking over at my Starbucks buddy. His name is Larry. And finally, just we've had this, casual friendship. And I said, Larry, what do you do? And he said, I work for a foster agency, and I do short-term care. And I'm thinking, God, this is so funny. So we talked for a while, but nothing, the needle didn't move until I think the thing that God used in my life was my youngest son was playing basketball on our goal in our neighborhood, on our front yard. And so there were three siblings who were playing out on the court, and they were about his age. And I said, hey, Jace, why don't you invite them to go to youth group tonight? So he did. He invited him to go to youth group. And the boy said, and we knew that they were foster kids in an adoption plan. And the boy said, well, my foster mom is an atheist, and so I doubt she's going to let us go. And Mike, that is when I felt like the straw, that broke the camel's back was Christ saying to me, if Christ followers are not going to foster and adopt, I'm going to take care of these kids, but they're in homes where they may never hear about me.
Wow.
And so I walked in and told Dawn, okay, let's start the paperwork. So
Wow.
that the biblical worldview was just, it was missional. It was not about necessarily trying to add another child into the car seat in the back, although those are wonderful stories, when you can foster to adopt. Ours was, there are kids that need a place to go. And Mike, you and I talked about this a minute ago. 51% of all children in America that are in foster care are in a reunification plan. So they're in a kinship reunification, and it's a long process. It's
A reconciliation, basically.
A reconciliation, a restoration. This is what the gospel is. The gospel is this restoration. They're in a restoration plan with their biological parents, and the courts are very favorable to biological grandparents and biological aunts and uncles. And so there are only 49% of kids that are technically adoptable, and they're mostly teenagers that are
Talking about American kids.
American kids. Yeah. So we got into the lane with the idea of, we're not necessarily, when you start into a fostering process, you submit to the county, and they run their background checks and their psych evaluations, and they do family studies, and you are approved to adopt, and then you can foster. So that way, if a child comes into your home, you have chemistry, and they end up, it's what you guys want to do, then you are approved to adopt. And many foster parents, that's their pathway. For us, because I had pastored at that time, maybe 25 years, the county came to us and said, we would like for you guys to be more of a short term and to foster the kids that are really coming from hard places. So intensive service kids. And so these kids were CSEC. That's an acronym for criminal sexual endangerment of children.
Okay.
So girls or boys that have been exploited, or they have been vulnerable, children that have self-harmed, children that have substance abuse problems, or children that are sexually active. And so those are the ones they brought into our home. And that is where we kind of cut our teeth. The first girl we had in, they told us, hey, we've got this teenager coming. She's a month, 30 days from aging out of the system. We just want you to help her, keep her together. And so we came in, and this girl came in, and I'm thinking, it's a teenager. She's almost 18. Am I going to get spray painted orange through the night? Am I going to be duct taped to the bed? She came in, and she was compliant, went with us to church, went with our kids to Six Flags. I mean, she was nice. The day before she turned 18, she self-sabotaged and walked out of the house, ran away with a drug dealer, and within 2 months, she had already shot someone. She's in jail today. And that is the crisis with these kids that are in hard places. They have self-fulfillment prophecies of just being an inmate like their parents, or being on drugs. And so that's a little bit about the vision and the cause for us.
Yeah, I'm glad you got into that, because one of the things I wanted to ask you was, how did you get involved in this? Because when we worked together, you were leading the adult ministries, you were had pastor, now you're an assistant pastor at the time, then later you'd go and pastor again. And so when I started hearing about some of the things you and Dawn were doing, it's like, I need to eventually just ask for information, just for my own benefit. And I figured if I'm curious, other people might be curious as well. I've never fostered, and I've never adopted. The closest I guess we have come, my wife and I housed a foreign exchange student for 3 months. 3 months. We had a girl from Korea in our home. So I have 5 daughters, you'll remember. And so we added another daughter. And so we had six girls in the house, and she was a year older than our oldest. And hard, man, was she hard to the gospel, and hard to Christianity, and just a lot of issues back home. She felt like, she was basically alienated from her parents. They had basically just shipped her away because they didn't want her, but under the guise of, we're going to help you get an American education. And so
Mhm.
just a lot of bitterness. But Jen and I just decided we were going to do our best to just show the love of Christ. We were going to connect her with the Korean ministry there at Lancaster, where we serve,
Mhm.
uh,
Yep.
and just try to model what a Christian home should look like. John, her last Sunday with us, she finally trusted Christ as her Savior.
That's amazing.
And she still calls my wife mom, and
Mhm.
we talk throughout the year. It's just a great story. But it
Mhm.
was, I'll say this, John, it was
Mhm.
a sacrifice of reordering your life, your priorities, and yeah, there was a stipend that was coming in to help with expenses, but we weren't in it for the money. It was really we were doing it because of a need for the gospel.
Mhm.
So I felt
Mission,
like
right?
when I saw something, especially the title of your book, Missional Fostering, I thought, I think John's probably he's doing a different angle of this, but I think our motives were probably the same. I remember as a kid people doing fostering for income,
Mm.
and it was sort of get the pat on the back for doing something altruistic, but the motive wasn't gospel centered at all. So I really want to talk to you because I felt like this was really growing out of James's passage where he says pure and undefiled religion is that you're taking
Yeah.
care of the fatherless and the orphans, etc. So um,
Yeah.
41 children through your home. What's been the average age?
They mostly give us teenagers. Um, and the kids who come in, I think because we had ministry years experiences pastoring. And by the way, Mike, you made a statement earlier. Um, for all of my years, when Dawn would talk about fostering or adoption, I remember looking at her, and this is casting no shade on you. This is just me. This is our story. I remember Dawn saying, if you want to do this, and I remember thinking, babe, we're so busy in churches. I mean, we're running here, we're
Right.
investing in all of these kids that go to our church. It's when our eyes were open to the kids that were broken in truly hard places, and that would be what God did for us. But the average age of kids that came into our home were mostly teenagers, and that's because in California, the group homes are being disbanded and they're forced to either supersize to become extreme short-term therapeutic residential treatment programs, or those kids have to be kind of assimilated into more foster homes. And so when you have a kid that's self-harm, or they've been sexually active, or they have drug issues, or one of the girls that was with us was 17, and she was texting people that were in men that were in Algeria, and they were asking her for nudies, and so that's your family dynamics change. And in the book, one of our chapters is called Instant Crazy Family, because your family, we want to say there's no drugs in our house and there's no weed in our house, and and then the foster kids come, and then you go, yes, there is. um
How many kids do you have at home? Your and Don kids. How many biological kids do you have
we
still?
have three. We had three bios. At the time that we started fostering, we only had two, and they were teenagers. So our daughter was maybe a junior. Our son was maybe a 10th grader. And so we had those concerns of, okay, if you bring influences, in, are they going to corrupt your children? But I think true in the same passage where we've got pure and undefiled religion, we have the verse that reminds us that every man is drawn away of his own lust. And the problem is not everyone else's kids or the kids that come from hard places. We have our own desires that get incited. And so it is true that we had to be careful. Like, we had one beautiful girl. This girl came into our home, and when she was sitting down at the table, and I remember I walked in one night, and she was beautiful. She looked like Lindsay Lohan. I mean, she was just gorgeous. And I thought, oh, brother, I've got a boy that's about the same age. And this had been her 33rd home. Kids just come in. They have hard times. And Mike, I know you and I talked about stats a little bit. And I know that when you talk about stats, it's just easy to zoom out and focus. But Mike, every day in America, 70 kids are removed from their homes and placed into foster care, which translates to about 250,000 kids a year, and they're needing a place to go. Um, I think that as we got into foster care, the more we realized how broken um, lives were. I mean, in church cultures, particularly churches where people wear masks and we have to present differently than we are. I identify as this perfect person who has it all together, right? And when you bring fosters in, there's no pretense. They are struggling to try to. They're mad at God. They're mad. They can't trust anybody. Some of them can't attach. They can't attach. They can't receive love. They can't give love. There has to be a biblical worldview. For us, it's been mission, this calling, this idea of a military post where you are serving kids that may never respond. 41 kids, we have relationships probably with 4 or 5 of them. One of them, we fostered for 14 months, a young boy, and he was able to be adopted by a Christian family. And that's a great story. And it's a Disney World, we want it all type thing.
Yeah.
But as sure as that's a great story, there have been other stories of kids you've been able to foster long enough so that they can go back into a reunification plan, and mom and dad are getting counseling and treatment and care. But Mike, 55% of all fosters will graduate from high school. That's basically 1 out of every 2. By age 19, 48% of all girls will be pregnant in foster care, and 46% of those will be pregnant twice. 80% of all of our inmates that are incarcerated spent time in foster care. 81% of all foster boys will be incarcerated in their lifetime. It's just
amazing, Jon.
It's sad.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's staggering. That's just a staggering number. So let me ask a question. How quickly do you and Don attach to these children, and how hard is it to see them go?
If you're doing it right, you attach quickly and you cry when they leave. That's how you know you're doing it right. I know people have said to us, "Oh, you guys are like superheroes. I could never do what you do." And I'm thinking, "Oh, what? You can't make peanut butter jelly sandwiches and drive somebody to school?" And you're doing it right when they leave and you hurt. That's how you know you've done it right. There are some that have left, and some kids have broken out, smashed out windows on their way out, stolen stuff, and they left, and we're like, okay, good. God bless you. We tried. But most of the times you just hurt when you see them leave, and they cry, and some of them just aren't able to. We've had some of them leave, and because they didn't learn attachment with their mother when they're young, they are not able, they never had their needs met. They would cry, no one would come. So they're unaffected by love. And so some kids, I remember we had a sibling set of 3 that we really, really connected with and were able to love on them. And those kids, when they left, they were just like, okay, see ya, and walked out. It's kind of like,
the next one.
Yeah, it's kind of like, that's it, but you foster not because of what you can get, but because of what the kids need.
So that sets up a next question I wanted to ask. What's a win look like?
Yeah. Okay. In our book, we talk about wins. And wins, I remember getting into this, Mike, I'm an optimist, idealist. This thing is halfway full. We can get this, right? you almost go in with the savior mentality. Hey, I am the Christ follower. And it is true that of the 41 kids, 3 of them accepted Christ while in our home.
Wow.
Um, those are home runs. Those are Disney World, touch them all, grand slam. But you can't live for those wins. The wins are, did you eat a healthy meal today? I mean,
Wow.
most foster kids, they've had to fend for themselves, so they live on junk food and potato chips and snacks and junk. And they come into our home and we say, okay, we're gonna have this meal, and they go, I don't like any of that. Okay, what can we? You have a couple of choices. You can eat this or you can eat this. Which do you choose? Right? Wins are helping them to eat a good meal, helping them to know they are unconditionally loved. And when a kid comes in, and I don't want to tell you about all the bad times, because of 41 there were some kinds that weren't, but for you to be able to show unconditional love for a kid when he lies or whatever, you're not going to get mad at him. Those are wins. Getting him to stay in school, for some kids it was, hey, you didn't go to the principal all day long, dude, let's go to DQ, let's get a blizzard, right? It's not about grades. It's not about getting them to get good grades. It's about helping them to get on the bus and come back home and just get through life.
How long does the average kid stay with you? I know you mentioned one
Okay.
was 14 months, but I don't think that's average, is it?
No, it is. Okay. So foster care, great. That's really a very perceptive question, Mike, because not all foster care is the same. In foster care, there are basically two roads. One is short term and one is long term. A long-term foster parent would be looking to adopt. So this would be somebody, they want a girl, they want a baby, they get in the long-term lane, and the county will try to put kids into their home if they meet the criteria that these foster parents have set. That's long-term. That long term, it's still, I think Joel and Christine went into that. Remember Joel and Christine Brown? They did long-term foster care, but it's a long game, because at the end of a year and a half, if they could reunify with their parents and you go, we've invested 2 years, that's the long-term game. But the other side of the equation, and this is what resonated with us, is the short term. So when Child Protective Services identifies that after their investigation, and they have months of investigation and casework, they determine these kids have to get removed at this moment. CPS needs a place for kids to go that night. So we did the short-term route. We would have kids that the very first people they saw after the police and they brought them to our house was us, and they walked in and they saw us. So you have kids coming in, they're shell shocked, they have PTSD, they're mad, they're angry, they're crying, they don't know where their parents are, they don't know why this is happening. Although we look at their life and say that is crazy, it was their norm.
Yeah.
So why can't they be around dad and mom? And sometimes they were mad at us. Sometimes it just really depended. So short-term care is usually 30 days, because the county is saying, okay, so we're going to put them in your home. And what they do, the plan in California was they actually rented beds from us. So we had 2 beds in one room, and the county said, we're going to rent them 24/7, 365. So at 2:30 in the morning, they call and say, hey, we're on our way over. We'll be there in 35 minutes. Dawn's got to run up and, get all herself presentable, right? And so you keep them for 30 days. Meanwhile, while they're with you, then the county is trying to identify next of kin. Where's the closest relative that they can put with this child? Or if they can't identify one, then they're going to put them in a long-term care where they can stay long-term.
How do these kids respond to, I'm imagining for some of them, it's their first time ever even going to church.
Yeah. Okay. So when we got into this, our county, Santa Barbara County, which is not especially friendly to the gospel and Christians, right?
Yep.
So we told them, but they needed people. And so our deal was, hey, listen, we are happy to keep anyone, but they have to go to church with me on Sunday because that's my job. They can sit in the back, they can have AirPods in, they can whatever, they just have to be in the building. And so when the county would bring people, it was that was the agreement, and so the kids would go, and it wasn't hard because when the kids come in the very first time, I just kind of look at them. If they're older, if they're 12, 10, 12, anyway, up through teenagers, I just would sit down and say, yo, bro, don't know why you're here. Probably you've had some tough things in life that you don't understand and I don't need to know about, but we're glad you're here. There's a God in heaven who's crazy about you. And my wife is a bomb cook. We're going to have great food. Friday night's usually movie night. Whatever you want out of the pantry, you can have. Just make sure that, you're eating approved things. And, it was kind of that. And when you give the choices, it's interesting, Mike, foster kids feel like they can't control anything. They can't control their parents fighting. Yeah, they can't control anything. So then when you give them choices, they feel like they can control answers. They often will respond well. So that's what it looked like with us. They all went to church. We didn't have any problems with the kids, but part of it, I think we just treated them with such, I'm not saying we did it right, but we treated them with respect. And you remember the Warren Wiersbe book out of Nehemiah, where he made a statement I'll never forget. He said, leadership is getting people to do what they need to do because they want to do it. And that was kind of how we had to look at it. How do we
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
To do what they need to do?
So you become almost a missionary for foster parenting.
Yeah.
So what are some of the obstacles that you hear sometimes people raise? Like I would imagine people would say something like, "There's no way I could ever do that," and maybe they don't have the time. Maybe they think it's a huge expense, or maybe there's other reasons. What have you come across, and how do you help diffuse those obstacles?
Okay, I really want to quick talk about. Do you realize how foster care happened? In the early days, if someone received a baby that they didn't want, they would leave them out in the elements. And the Christ followers in the early church would go find out, and they would rescue these babies and they would care for them. But the problem in a very agrarian society is it's expensive. I mean, now foster care, when you talk about people doing it for money, so let me just shoot real straight for all of your listeners who are thinking that it averages about 30 cents an hour. So that's or about $1 an hour. That's probably the way to put it. So it's about $25-$30 a day. So if that's the money for you, knock yourself out.
Quite a bit of Starbucks.
Yeah, you can get about 6 of them. But so now in America, it's amazing that I speak from the context of California. California, they are very enabling. All of the medical insurance, everything medical, dental, anything is covered.
Wow.
If the kids in California, because they're foster kids, they get 3 meals a day. Now, I got to tell you, they're pretty garbage meals. I mean, we try to get them off of them because it's all junk foods or, sandwiches with mayonnaise and cheese, and you're going, we got to get something whole inside of you. But it's really not an issue. They give them backpacks, everything you need. In fact, when we talked about doing short-term care, kids are dropped off. Dawn would stockpile, so you could get a kid from 0 to 18. So she would have diapers in every stage, right? But once that kid's dropped off, the state, they drop off 2 children in your home because they need that 30-day period. The state is immediately going to give you gift cards of $75 for each child. You go, you buy them their necessities. The state will make sure the kids have lunch. You have to drive them to school, but it's really not an expense. They've made it easy. And Mike, in 41 kids, only 1 kid was able to dream, but the state will pay for your college. And this girl keeps up with me regularly. She is in college. She is an overachiever. She is the only kid. I would cut the Wi-Fi off at 11 at night. That way,
Yeah, yeah.
She's the only one. She came and asked and said if it could be on after 11. I was like, why? And she said, I want to do my homework. And she graduated from her school early. But the states will look at a foster kid, and pay for their college education if they could just dream and get there. But the number of kids, foster kids, I read a stat this week that said 33% of all males and 75% of all females will be on government assistance by the age of 25. So the kids aren't dreaming for college, although our state and the counties would provide for them. There's no expense, truly.
Wow.
Expensive time. It's expensive, just love. It does change your family dynamic. And
Talk to me a little bit about that. How have your kids responded?
okay, so our oldest son was already out, but he fell in love with the little boy that we had for 14 months, and he was probably 2 or 3. I remember thinking, I can't believe at my age I'm changing diapers, and just thinking
That weren't your grandkids.
yes, and they
Yeah.
weren't mine. But this kid stayed with us so long. We just fell in love with him. And then, although we were short term, the county left him there because he was nonverbal. He had been neglected. All of a sudden, he starts thriving. And so the county leaves him there with us for 14 months. And after, about 4 months, we're talking to the county workers. You don't need to move him. He's fine. Wait till you get a long-term plan. But our oldest son was very interested. Now, our daughter went into social work. So she is a social worker.
Was this connected, you think, to the fact of you and Don pursuing missional fostering?
Yeah, I think she just saw how she could make a difference in an impacted kid's life. So now she works with intensive service kids, which that's challenging. And then in our youngest, probably, truthfully, in full disclosure, our youngest had bad experiences because they would get into his stuff or they would lie about him. I remember one of the teenagers we had said, hey, your son, I'm not going to say his name here, but your youngest son is doing marijuana. It's like, what? So yeah, down at the skate park, we both went, and this boy got caught doing weed. And so he came home and he said, well, your son does it too. I was like, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, down at the skate park. So I'm grilling my son saying, you don't lie to me or whatever. He had some tough shakes, of things, but I think they're all open to fostering and adoption, just because it just helps meet a need. There's a guy named Brian Mavis. He made a quote I'll never forget. I put it in our book. So this is my props to a guy named Brian Mavis. I forget who he's connected with, but he said, people asked me, why did you pursue foster care? And he said, I didn't pursue foster care. I pursued Jesus, and Jesus led me to some needy kids. And so that's kind of, I guess that's the best way of saying why we got into this. And foster care is not right for everybody. And there are seasons and times of life. And we're actually not fostering right now. We've relocated. It's coming off a sabbatical a bit. So I don't know how it looks for us.
Okay, you stop for just a moment. You said fostering is not for everyone, but I think everyone can do something.
Yeah. So Jason Johnson is probably the Elon Musk, in my opinion, of fostering. And that was his statement. Not everyone can foster, but everybody can do something. So I think one of the questions we get asked are, okay, I really can't foster. What can I do? And I look at empty nesters, and I think empty nesters could be amazing influencers. Now, they don't see it, and they have to be willing to get F-bombed, at every moment and be a taxi. But there are needs that foster agencies and foster children have. Like, foster kids go to an inordinate amount of doctor appointments. And so for a foster parent to have to take time off work to drive this kid to the doctor to come back, there are empty nesters, and there are people that could be designated drivers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
they could be designated drivers and get involved. There are positions called respite care, which is a really highfalutin word for babysitters. So that way, like when Dawn and I wanted to have a date, because we had intensive service kids, we couldn't just drop them off with Mike and Jenny, although Mike and Jenny are nice people. We had to drop them off with um, respites or babysitters that had gone through screening and
Sure.
background checks and were approved to handle. So becoming a respite, and then you decide, hey, do I want to, watch these kids for a couple hours while this family goes out to eat? Respite care is huge. Tutors, foster kids, if only 55% of them are graduating from high school, there is a massive need for
Yeah.
tutors, and that's just coming alongside a kid and helping them. And it's because foster kids, they come into your home, then they go to the school in your district, and then they transfer to the long-term home, and they go to a brand new school, brand new teachers, start over, new curriculum, and then they get moved back to their kinship relationship. So then they go to a new school. They're always behind in education. So there are states where foster kids do not get provided for all of their foods and their meals and their backpacks. Like I've noticed in Indianapolis, where we are, there are a lot of agencies that are saying we're going to provide a backpack for kids. And many times at Christmas time, that's a time when foster kids get showered with gifts, and it's hard because they can't always see the love behind it. It's just hard because they have a very skewed version of love. But these are things that people can do if they're interested. Start following influencers. There's a Christian Alliance for Orphans. It's probably the premier American organization that focuses on adoption and fostering, and they would deal more with the global orphans, so those adopting from the sub-Sahara regions of Africa, and they would be great connections. But you can start following some of those people and just hearing about the causes. But foster kids are everywhere. It particularly if someone's in Los Angeles or New York City. I forget this. I want to say it's an inordinate percentage, maybe 20% of all of the kids in foster care are in those two cities, Los Angeles and New York City.
Wow.
And so, just Christ followers being aware that, we could be a temporary parent. And if you truly, when kids came into the home, Mike, I wasn't trying to give them the gospel. I wasn't allowed to. I was allowed to live it. And I truly believe Christ lives in me. I mean, this dwelling in Christ and Christ in me, I truly believe Jesus was onto something in John 17, right? So I have Jesus in me. So as I incarnate Christ into the situation, I don't have to be the savior. I don't have to be the hero. I don't have to have a conversion. I'm not trying to get them to pray a prayer. I'm just trying to help them see that there is hope in this world. And many times they haven't seen it.
What are the qualifications needed for somebody who wants to pursue fostering? What's the process?
That's a great question. It changes from state to state. So I will speak generally about the things that I know. You can be a single parent, a single, non-married. You can foster. There are background checks that the state or the county will run. Depends on some. Anyways, in America, it's different from state to state, but you have to pass a background check, and then there's normally a psychiatric evaluation that they will do. Okay, some of the big topics now are how are you going to respond to a transgender? And Mike, are you ready for this? One of the girls that came into our home flew the gay pride flag she put the flag up on our bedroom in our house, and I walk by it every day, and I loved her. And it wasn't about judging her or wanting to persuade her. She actually texted me the other day. She aged out of the system in our house, and she said, well, I have a debit card, a checking account, and a part-time job. I guess I'm adulting quite well. And Mike, it's the understanding the kids nowadays, and the background checks will help you with so many of those things. But this main thing is Googling in your county foster parents, how to become a foster parent, and they will put you in touch with the county or some private agencies that can help with that.
I've enjoyed hearing the story of how you and Don got into this. I've also enjoyed connecting the fact that the Bible tells us what pure religion and what the heart of God is, about taking care of those that are without parents at the moment, whether that's fostering, adoption, orphans, whatever. There's principles there. But you've done a great job in presenting the need as well. Some of the stats we've shared have been just literally overwhelming. But I also appreciate the fact that you have connected us to resources. Here's Brian Mavis. Here's this organization, and here's I think about Los Angeles and New York. And then you've mentioned a few times. Tell me a little bit about your book and where somebody could get it.
Our book is called Missional Fostering. You can get it on Amazon. You can also, at our website, when you talk about resources, at our website, missionalfostering.org, you can obviously order a book on our website, but there's also a Calendly link where somebody could have a 30-minute conversation. Hey, I just want a dialogue. What would this look like? The book has been written in a connect group format so that as a pastor, recognizing that I still to this day know of only one life group curriculum that talks about fostering and has connect group questions at the end.
Wow.
So that's a missionalfostering.org. You can have a Calendly link. I'm very willing to, you can also schedule a time for me to come speak at the church. But Mike, I think Christ followers, they don't have to be the savior. They just have to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And who knows what Jesus can do through us.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the conversation. So let me wrap this up by asking sort of a softball question to you. This is an area I am not as familiar with. Have I missed anything I should ask that a potential listener may be thinking, I need more information about X? Is there anything else that you would say, don't forget about this or whatever?
Well, great question. I think if people realize they don't have to have all the answers, there are an amazing amount of county provided resources. They call them wraparound services, safety services. You can have a teenager doing a meltdown or a kid melting down in your house, pick up the phone, call a wraparound, and they will walk you through, okay, take all sharp objects out of the room. It'll kind of help you be calm. Let kids borrow your calmness. They just practical things that I'm going to share my calmness with you right now. And you're just amazed at how you can get resources to help you in the moment when you're not thinking so well. You're just thinking, dude, this is going terrible. There are resources. So you're not out on an island. There are people to help coach you.
Yeah, it's good. So for my listeners today, fostering short-term or long-term, here's a great person, Jon Stone, if you want some more resources. Jon, I've enjoyed our conversation today. Thanks for coming on the show. It's taught me some things, opened my eyes a little bit as well. I hope it has for our listeners as well. But thanks for the time today. I've really enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks for sharing. It's so good to see you, Mike.
You too, Jon. I'm sure we'll talk again later.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.